Have you ever done everything you were supposed to do to feel happy? You got the degree, landed the good job, and built a life that looks perfect from the outside. But on the inside, you feel completely, utterly lost. You wake up each morning with a hollow feeling in your chest. You go through the motions meetings, emails, polite parties feeling like an actor playing a part. Your life feels like a carefully constructed house of cards, and you're terrified that the slightest breeze will bring it all tumbling down. You've found success, but fulfillment is nowhere in sight. You're surrounded by people, yet you feel profoundly alone. This was the silent crisis of a young professional we'll call Alex. On the surface, Alex was the poster child for modern success. Corner office with a city view, a sleek apartment, a social media feed that painted a picture of a perfect life. He had checked every single box society handed him. But the silence in his apartment at night was deafening. The person in the mirror was a stranger. He was drowning in an emptiness that no promotion, no purchase, no fleeting pleasure could ever fill. He was about to discover that the way out of this crisis wasn't to build his life up more, but to break it down with 5 unconventional rules from one of history's greatest minds, Carl Jung. Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who founded analytical psychology, offered a path not to a life free of pain, but to one overflowing with meaning, a path to becoming whole. And for Alex, like for so many of us, trapped on the hamster wheel of modern achievement, the third rule, in particular, would change everything he thought he knew about himself, about happiness, and about what it truly means to be alive. The unseen map. What if that feeling of being lost isn't a sign that you've failed? What if it's a sign that your soul is calling you toward a deeper life? What if the emptiness you feel is actually a space waiting to be filled, not with more achievements, but with more of you? Carl Jung believed that so many of our modern problems come from being disconnected from our true selves, building the persona, social masks to fit in, to please our parents, to meet the world's expectations. But then, as Jung observed, you can't live the afternoon of your life using the same map you used for the morning. The soul starts to demand what it's owed. This is where Jung's 5 pillars for a happier life come in. They aren't quick fixes or life hacks. They are a map back home to ourselves. They are simple, they are profound, and they have the power to reorient your entire existence. Alex stumbled upon them during a late-night search for answers, a desperate attempt to find a name for the nameless dread that followed him all day. And with that, his journey began. The first rule, the foundation of body and mind. The first pillar on Jung's map is maybe the most basic, yet it's the one we so often sacrifice for our ambition, good physical and mental health. Jung understood that the mind and body aren't separate things. They're a deeply connected system. You can't have a brilliant mind in a neglected body, and you can't enjoy physical health when your mind is in chaos. It's the essence of the old Latin proverb, mens sana in corpore sano, a sound mind in a sound body. For Alex, this was a tough pill to swallow. His entire life was built on the opposite belief. He ran on caffeine and takeout, seeing sleep as an inconvenience that stole hours from his work. Exercise was the frantic dash between meetings and his mental health. He'd pushed it so far down, buried it under so many layers of work and distraction, that he didn't even know how to check in with himself anymore. He was running on fumes, and the engine was about to seize. His first step was painfully simple. yet it felt massive. He started by going for a walk on his lunch break. Instead of eating at his desk, he walked to a nearby park. He started a simple, daily mindfulness practice, just 5 minutes of focusing on his breath. He began to prioritize sleep, shutting off his screens an hour before bed. At first, it felt wrong. Every instinct screamed that he was wasting time, that he was falling behind. The hustle culture we live in tells us self-care is a luxury, something you earn after the real work is done. But Jung's wisdom shows us the opposite. It's the prerequisite. It is the solid ground you need before you can build any stable structure of happiness. Slowly, Alex started to notice a change. The constant brain fog began to lift. The low-grade hum of anxiety that was always under the surface of his thoughts started to quiet down. He wasn't cured. That was never the point. As Jung wisely said, a happy life will always have its share of darkness. But Alex was building resilience. He was creating a foundation strong enough to hold the weight of his own life. He was learning that you can't build a skyscraper on a foundation of sand, and you can't build a meaningful life on a foundation of burnout. He was finally escaping that terrifying trap of spending your health to gain wealth, only to spend your wealth to regain your health. The second rule, the lifeline of connection. With a slightly steadier foundation, Alex turned to the second pillar. Good, personal, and intimate relationships, like those in a marriage, a family, or deep friendships. Jung recognized that we are, at our core, social creatures. We find ourselves and create ourselves, not alone, but in the mirror of our relationships with other people. These connections aren't just nice additions to life. They are essential for our psychological well-being. They are where we practice empathy, figure out conflict, and experience the profound, soul-lifting joy of being truly seen and accepted by another person. This was Alex's next great challenge. His relationships, just like his health, had become all about transactions. Networking events had replaced real friendships. He had hundreds of connections online, but not one person he could call if his world fell apart. His calls with his family were brief and shallow, full of career updates, but empty of any real emotion. He was a master of playing the part of the charming, successful guy, but he had completely forgotten how to just be Alex. Jung's work warns us that so many relationships are built on unconscious projections. We don't fall in love with the actual person. We fall in love with who we need them to be: a savior, a project, a filler for our own emptiness. This is why so many relationships start with that magical, perfect feeling and end in bitter disappointment. The illusion shatters, and we're left staring at our own unhealed wounds again. Alex's journey into this second rule was a journey into being vulnerable. It started with a phone call to his sister, not to announce a promotion, but to admit that he was struggling. It was awkward and difficult, but it was real. He started reaching out to old friends, not to network, but just to connect. He suggested a coffee, a walk, a simple meal. He focused on listening instead of performing. This was terrifying work. It meant taking off the mask, showing the messy, uncertain person underneath, and trusting that he wouldn't be rejected. As Jung taught, a real relationship has to be tested by difficulty. It's not the good times that prove it's real, but how you handle the hard ones. Alex learned that intimacy isn't about being perfect. It's about having the courage to be imperfect together. He discovered that the connection he desperately wanted couldn't be found in a crowded room. It was found in the quiet moments of shared laughter with a friend. or the comforting presence of a family member who loved him for who he was, not what he did. As research from Harvard's long-running study on happiness has proven, and as Jung knew in his bones, good relationships literally keep us healthier and happier, period. Love, in all its forms, is the bedrock of a meaningful life. The third rule, the unexpected revolution of beauty. And now, we come to the third pillar. The one that, for Alex, was the most unexpected, the most foreign, and in the end, the most transformative. The ability to see and appreciate beauty in art and nature. This rule sounds almost quaint, doesn't it? In our world, which is obsessed with productivity, with metrics, with return on investment, what's the value of looking at a sunset? What's the point of being moved by a piece of music? To a mind like Alex's, trained to see the world as a list of problems to solve and goals to hit, this pillar seemed pointless, a distraction from the real work of life. But Jung understood something deep. He knew that an appreciation for beauty isn't a luxury. It is food for the soul. It's the antidote to the dry, empty feeling of a purely rational, materialistic life. It connects us to something much larger than our own small egos. It wakes up a sense of wonder that the modern world is systematically trying to kill. Jung believed beauty nourishes the soul, opening a door to the spiritual and building a bridge between our inner and outer worlds. Alex's first attempts were clumsy. He literally scheduled appreciate beauty into his calendar. He went to a museum and stared at paintings while his mind raced with work emails. He went for a hike in the mountains, but spent most of it checking his phone for a signal. He was trying to achieve beauty, to conquer it like another task on his to-do list. The breakthrough came when he finally gave up. One evening, exhausted and defeated, he was walking home from the office. It had been raining, and the city streets were slick and dark. He was lost in his usual anxious thoughts when he happened to glance down at a puddle. In its surface, the neon signs of the city, the streetlights, and the deep violet of the evening sky were reflected in a swirling, shimmering mosaic of light. It was breathtakingly, unexpectedly beautiful. He just stopped. For the first time in years, he wasn't rushing to the next thing. He was just there, witnessing. For a full minute, he forgot his deadlines, his anxieties, his carefully built persona. He was simply a consciousness experiencing a moment of profound, unearned beauty. That single moment created a crack in the dam of his conditioning. He started to get it. Perceiving beauty wasn't an activity, it was a state of being. It was about shifting from a mindset of using the world to one of witnessing it. It was about letting yourself be stopped in your tracks by the pattern of frost on a window, the complex melody of a bird's song, the emotional weight of a chord in a sad song, or the unexpected kindness in a stranger's face. This was the revolution for Alex. His entire life had been built on utility. People, experiences, and time itself were all judged by how useful they were to his goals. Beauty, however, has no purpose. It serves nothing beyond itself. And in learning to value it, Alex was learning to value things and people, and himself, for reasons other than their function. He was deprogramming the part of his brain that believed his worth was tied to his productivity. He started visiting the art museum again, but this time with no goal. He would just wander until a piece caught his eye, and then he would sit with it, letting it speak to him. He found that sad music didn't make him sadder. It resonated with the sadness he already carried and made it feel beautiful and shared, a part of the human experience. He learned that spending time in nature was scientifically shown to boost well-being, and he could feel it in his bones. The rustling of leaves, the vastness of the sky, it all put his own problems into perspective. It reminded him that he was part of a grand, mysterious, and beautiful cosmos. This third pillar rewired his soul. It taught him the value of being present, the joy of not doing, and the deep peace that comes from connecting with something timeless. It was the most unbelievable rule because it asked for nothing and gave him everything. It didn't solve his problems, but it made them part of a much larger, more beautiful picture. The fourth rule, the dignity of work and a place to stand. Having reconnected with his soul through beauty, Alex was ready to face the fourth pillar, the one that touched the very structure of his day-to-day life, a reasonable standard of living and satisfactory work. Notice Jung's careful choice of words. He doesn't say get rich or find your dream job. He says reasonable and satisfactory. This is a huge distinction. The modern world sells us a myth of endless hustle and a single, all-consuming passion. Jung, with his grounded wisdom, knew this was a recipe for feeling like a constant failure. This pillar is about stability and meaning. A reasonable standard of living just means having enough to be free from the constant, grinding stress of survival. It's about having a safe place to live, enough food, and being able to meet your needs without drowning in debt. It's not about luxury, it's about dignity. Alex had more than enough, but he was starting to see how his extravagant lifestyle was just a cage, forcing him to stay in a job he was starting to hate just to maintain it all. The second part, satisfactory work, is even deeper. Satisfactory work doesn't mean you're saving the world every single day. It means your work feels purposeful, uses your skills, and doesn't make you betray your core values. It's about finding a sense of meaning in what you do. Jung knew that work completely disconnected from meaning eats away at the human spirit. For Alex, this was the moment of truth. His job, the very source of his external success, was the source of his internal decay. It was prestigious, it paid well, but it was profoundly unsatisfactory. It didn't line up with the more authentic person that was starting to emerge. This was maybe the scariest step of all. Guided by Jung's framework, Alex began to question everything. He wasn't just unhappy. He was realizing his work was out of alignment with who he really was. The journey to become yourself demands that your outer life eventually has to reflect your inner truth. He didn't quit his job overnight. That would have been impulsive. Instead, he started exploring. He asked himself a question Jung might have asked. What did you do as a child that made the hours pass like minutes? That's where you'll find the key. He remembered his love for building things, for solving real, tangible problems. He signed up for a weekend carpentry course, not as a new career, but just as an experiment. He also began to redefine what reasonable meant to him. He realized how much of his money went toward keeping up his image, to signaling success to other people. He downsized his apartment. He started cooking at home. With every choice, he felt lighter, freer. He was trading the heavy chains of external approval for the quiet dignity of being self-sufficient. Eventually, he did leave his corporate job. He took a big pay cut to work for a smaller company that built sustainable housing. The work was hard, but it was real. It was satisfactory. He was no longer selling abstract ideas. He was helping to build homes. He was, for the first time, doing work that felt like an extension of himself, not a betrayal. The fifth rule, the anchor in the storm. Alex had rebuilt his foundation. He had reconnected with people, rediscovered beauty, and realigned his work. He was happier and more fulfilled than he had ever been. But there was one final pillar, the one that would hold everything else together: a philosophical or religious outlook on life. Jung believed that to navigate the guaranteed chaos and suffering of life, we need an anchor. We need a set of beliefs, a personal philosophy, or a spiritual connection that helps us find meaning in hardship and connect to something bigger than we are. Life will bring pain, loss, and darkness. That's unavoidable. A philosophical outlook is what allows us to bear its ills without being overcome by them. It's what lets us walk through the fire and not be consumed. This isn't about joining a specific religion. For Jung, who studied the myths and faiths of the entire world, the specific form was less important than the function. Whether it's a formal religion, a spiritual practice, a connection to the cosmos, or a deeply held humanistic philosophy, the goal is the same: to give you a framework for meaning that goes beyond your ego's immediate wants and fears. It answers the huge why questions that show up in the middle of the night. For Alex, who had always been a strict materialist, this was the final frontier. His old worldview, where life was just a random series of events with no real meaning, offered him zero comfort when faced with life's challenges. His exploration here was deeply personal. He started reading not for information, but for wisdom. He read the Stoics, learning about the power of accepting what you cannot change. He read Buddhist texts, exploring the nature of suffering and compassion. He dove into the great thinkers who influenced Jung's own ideas on meaning and becoming yourself. He didn't find God in the usual sense. Instead, he cultivated a sense of connection to what Jung called the numinous, the mystery, the awe-inspiring reality that lies just beyond our rational minds. He found it in the silence of meditation, in the vastness of the night sky, and in the profound sense of interconnectedness he felt when he was truly present with nature or art. He developed a personal philosophy centered on growth, compassion, and contribution. His why was no longer to pile up wealth or status, but to continue the journey of becoming more whole and to help others in his own small way. This philosophy didn't stop bad days from happening. It didn't get rid of sadness or frustration, but it gave them a context. A setback was no longer a personal failure. It was a chance to grow. An argument was an opportunity to practice compassion. His life was no longer a random walk. It was a journey with a purpose, even if he was the one creating that purpose. This outlook became his anchor, holding him steady in the storms of life. The start of your journey. Alex's transformation wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was a beginning. He didn't find a life free from problems, but a life rich with meaning. He traded the brittle, hollow perfection of his old life for the messy, vibrant, authentic reality of a life lived in alignment with his soul. Jung's 5 pillars are not a checklist to finish. They are a compass for a lifelong journey. 1. Good physical and mental health, the foundation for everything else. 2. Good personal and intimate relationships, the lifeline that connects us to ourselves and each other. 3. The ability to perceive beauty, the revolutionary act of finding value beyond usefulness, of feeding your soul. 4. A reasonable standard of living and satisfactory work, the dignity of a stable place to stand and a meaningful way to contribute. 5. A philosophical or religious outlook, the anchor that gives meaning to our struggles and connects us to something larger. These pillars are simple, but they are not easy. They demand courage. They demand honesty. They demand that we turn inward and ask the hard questions. As Jung said, who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. The feeling of being lost, the emptiness that haunted Alex and that might be haunting you, is not a curse. It is a summons. It is your soul telling you that the life you are living is too small. It is calling you to a deeper, more authentic existence. It is inviting you to begin the most sacred journey of all. The journey to become who you truly are. If Alex's story hit home for you, if you feel that call to a deeper life, then your journey starts right now. Take one small step today. It could be a 5-minute walk, a real phone call to a loved one, a moment spent just looking at the sky, or a quiet minute to ask yourself what you truly need. Let us know in the comments which of these 5 pillars you feel called to work on first. Your story could be the spark that someone else needs to see. And if you want to continue this journey of self-discovery, of applying timeless wisdom to modern life, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this with someone you think might need to hear it. The path is long, but you don't have to walk it alone. Begin today.